All right, folks, joining us now is Richard Perle, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and former Chair of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board and Assistant Secretary of State, former Assistant Secretary of State, of course. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
I am dying to hear your take on the speech by Bibi Netanyahu today.
Well, I think it was an excellent speech and should put behind us the controversy over whether he should have been invited. It's time to focus on the substance of what he had to say. And he made a compelling case for not rushing into an agreement that is flawed in so many ways. I hope that his audience will pay close attention.
What was the most impressive part of the substance part of the speech to you?
Well, two things, really. First, he put in context who it is we're negotiating with. You can't negotiate with a friend or an ally in quite the same way you negotiate with an adversary. And in this case, we're talking about an adversary that is committed to the death of the United States and, of course, of Israel. And under those circumstances, you can't treat this like ordinary diplomacy. This is not a tax treaty with the United Kingdom. So he provided some context for who the Iranians are, for the attacks on Americans and Israelis and support for terrorism, and all of that has to be factored in. Secondly, he made it pretty clear that this agreement will not block, but will in fact pave the way for Iran's acquisition of nuclear weapons.
What do you
And I guess I should add a third point,
Yeah.
which is he refuted the idea that it's either this agreement or some other catastrophic outcome. There are other ways to deal with the Iranian nuclear threat than war or submission.
What do you make of the two provisions that he talked about today that were alluded to and exposed, if you will, yesterday by Obama and his administration, the one-year breakout and the 10-year limitation?
Well, the 10-year limitation is a killer because it means that the Iranians could comply completely with the requirements for a decade. And then as the agreement expires, they are within easy reach of nuclear weapons, or we're forced into a further negotiation, but with virtually no leverage. The sanctions will have disappeared. The idea that we could resume sanctions at that point, I think, is quite foolish. So that's a very serious problem with this agreement, and he seemed to be suggesting that if it were an agreement in perpetuity, while it would still have all of the other problems he identified, the Israelis could somehow live with it. I don't think Obama will take this seriously because the Iranians won't agree to an agreement in perpetuity.
Now, as far,
the reason why they won't agree to it is precisely the reason that makes it so dangerous. They know where they're headed, and they're headed toward nuclear weapons and the missiles to deliver them.
And the one-year breakout? I mean...
Well, who knows what the breakout is? It's a year, some people are arguing, if you assume perfect compliance. But we know that the Iranians have a history of cheating. They have a history of clandestine, unreported locations. Military facilities will not be included in the inspection regime, and they have hidden things in military facilities. So it's impossible to say what the breakout period is. One thing is clear: if they have a full-blown nuclear infrastructure, which is what they will have under this agreement, the likelihood of breakout, or the potential breakout, is very real, and nobody can pinpoint how long it will take.
What did you think Elie Wiesel being there and being introduced by the Prime Minister was a positive? Do you think it was received well?
It was clearly received well. Elie Wiesel got the standing ovation that he richly deserves, and he was a reminder. He was a reminder of the phrase that he used and that Elie Wiesel is used on many occasions. I actually saw him yesterday in Washington. Never again. That is, never again should the potential for genocide be allowed, and that means taking action before it's too late. And that means not entering into agreements that predictably will place the most lethal weapons in the hands of the most dangerous enemies.
If a deal of this nature is reached and signed, what does Israel do?
Well, first of all, it would have to be dealt with in the United States, and I was a little surprised that there has been so little discussion about what the Constitution provides in the case of the President's power to enter into international agreements or treaties. The Constitution is very clear. The President has the power to enter into a treaty, but the Senate has the power to reject that treaty if it chooses to do so in the ratification process. The Obama administration, which is not unused to revising the Constitution, seems to take the position that they're not bound by that very clear, unmistakable constitutional protection. I believe the Senate should even now be insisting that any agreement that is signed by the President is sent for submission for the ratification process in the Senate, like every other important treaty that the United States has ever entered into. So even before the question arises of what Israel might do, the Senate of the United States will have a challenge, which is to insist on Obama administration compliance with the constitutional right to review and approve or reject the treaty. And if I had to guess, from the sentiment we saw expressed during the speech and other indications, the administration would have a very difficult time getting two-thirds of the Senate to ratify a treaty like the one that was discussed today.
You would think, and you would hope. Richard, always great to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much.
All the best.
Richard Perle, ladies and gentlemen. And when we come back, we're going to discuss it all and more, including Hillary and her email with the Malzberg panel. Don't go away.